All right, perfect. Today on SEO Leadership, we are very, very, very excited to welcome our guest from Blue Array Ignite. He is Liam Quinn, the SEO Blue Array Ignite Director. So, Blue Array Ignite is a 12-month program to help startups and scale ups drive organic growth via SEO. Liam has been actually conducting a live audit last week as well and helping chats to business owners and founders. So we are very excited to have Liam on today to chat anything team building related, personal growth, strategy, more about what Blue Array Ignite is, and so much more. So, Liam, thank you so much for coming on the webinar. How are you keeping?
No problem. Yeah, pleasure to be here, and yeah, doing really well. Just saying earlier, the sun's out. It's Friday, so can't complain too much at the moment. How about
That's
yourself?
always great. No, yes, sun's out by us as well. I think we're all enjoying the sun today. So
Good
thankfully it's a
stuff.
good day. But yes, Liam, I think we always try to sort of like get into a massager question of how did you get into SEO? So for any of our listeners tuning in, can you tell them a little bit about your career journey, how you got into SEO, and how you got into your current role at the moment?
Yeah, of course. So, like most, somewhat fell into it, but I did have more of a marketing focus at university. So, did a 4-year university course on international business. I then didn't know what I wanted to do at all, so ended up doing a postgrad on international marketing, and then came out of university kind of similar to most, not really sure how to use my degree or in what kind of marketing field or channel to go into. And then out of university, I ended up landing a pretty neat job where it was like a 2-year graduate role. And in the first year, there was someone at an agency that would train you up and show you the ropes for a year. And then in the second year, you take it all on yourself and they take a backward step and only support you once a week per se. And during that role, I worked across all channels. So SEO, paid advertising, email marketing, ran a podcast which had 80 episodes or so, range of different things, which was quite cool and exposed me to, all the different channels of marketing. And then around the first year of COVID also applied for a job at Blue Array and I've been here for 3.5-ish years now. Started as an SEO manager, so very much on the front line working with a range of different clients. And then moved into a senior manager role after around 18 months or so. And then for the past 18 months, approximately, I've been working in a bit of a split role. So half of my role is overseeing Blue Array Ignite, which is our program for startups and scale-ups. And then the other half is the SEO director half. So supporting a team within the company to help with their strategies and ensuring that their clients are performing well. So yeah, no days are ever quite the same, and very all hands on across both of those.
I can imagine you are extremely, extremely busy. But I think I wanted to sort of ask just the first question around as Blue Array Ignite is a 12-month program, and you've been naturally with Blue Array Ignite for 18 months now. How was your first proper 12-month experience working with clients on that side? How did you find
It
it?
was definitely a huge learning curve. I guess to give a bit of a backstory of how Blue Array Ignite came around. When we initially started as an agency, our founder Simon moved from working at big in-house companies to becoming a freelancer and then scaling up as an agency. And we were that scrappy startup style agency as we were quite small, looking at tech hubs, co-working spaces, all those kind of people to make connections. And Simon did a great job in that area of building relationships. And then as we transitioned into a company of 30, 50 people, we started to, take on a finance team, a HR team, a marketing team, and those different departments. And we started to sort of ended up working with typically enterprise and largest sized clients, which is great. It means that you can work on, those big juicy sites and they often have big budgets and all that kind of stuff. But we realized actually we'd lost kind of our touch with that startup scale up community. So that's where Ignite was introduced. And as I first started, I guess it was kind of learning how to service clients in a way that still shows that value, but naturally they're on a lower budget, a lower time commitment in terms of number of days, and also have mixed resources. Some potentially only have 1 or 2 people in their marketing team versus maybe a team that has 3 SEOs, 3 content writers, 3 people who are generalists or whatever those roles might be. So really understanding how to give them recommendations and strategic value that they could actually implement because they had the time to do it, but also make sense. And obviously on the flip side of that, they're typically sites with less authority that are just starting out. So thinking of strategies that are ultimately going to work for them, where maybe they're competing with big companies that have got a huge amount of resource and investment. And I guess one of the cool parts about that side of our company is that typically our account managers for Blu-ray Ignites accounts will be execs or senior execs, or perhaps people who have got a little bit less experience from an account management standpoint. So it was a fun first 6-12 months trying to work out that process to support them as best as possible to eventually succeed with those accounts.
Awesome, fantastic. Darius, you had a question lined up?
Yeah, no, I think Josh actually has a question. Within that sort of 12-month stint, what's been the most impactful strategy that sort of moves the needle across all your clients? I know there's probably not one. I know it probably changes a lot from client to client, but is there anything you sort of noticed across that sort of space that tends to work a bit better?
It's a good question, and it's hard to give a defined answer because they all naturally do range in industries and size and stuff. But one thing that I find really interesting in that startup and scale up scene is that typically we're leaning much more towards brand, EAT, and authority than we typically might do with a larger site that's already established. So I think like SEO for startups and scale ups, while we naturally do look at tech, content, links, those key pillars, we tend to steer towards questions like, is it clear what this company is actually trying to sell? Are they just speaking in investor language? So do they have a site that's primarily there just to seek investment through series funding? Or is it clear to users what they're trying to sell? Do they have a clear user journey funnel? All those kind of things. So in a sense, that's broader than just SEO, but it's really cool to dive into that in terms of, do they have a supporting blog that actually talks about their products and services? Are they linking correctly? And while that might not directly be a one specific tactic or strategy that's going to lead to a huge amount of organic clicks, it sort of sets the scene across a wider stretch for them to be able to succeed moving forward. And I think when we get that in place, that's when we can start having fun and really scaling content and links to those key product pages. So yeah, it's kind of like a combination of SEO and brand pushed together, which in my view is somewhere where the industry is hopefully heading.
Yeah,
awesome.
No, I love that. And Liam, on that, when you said that they have more sort of sites geared towards investors, do you ever get sort of like backlash or like sort of friction whenever you're trying to persuade them, like, listen, like, I know that's obviously very important to you guys as well, but if you want to actually see results here, you need to sort of change that. How do you sort of manage that?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to putting your case forward ultimately. Typically, there's always going to be a trade-off for sites, regardless of whether they're a scale-up looking for an investment or they're a big corporate site that maybe has tech, legal considerations or limitations. So I just think it just comes down to communication and showing what the objective is. Trying to put your case forward and acknowledging that there are other channels that you want to consider or that they might want to consider before making these decisions, but we're looking at it from a purely SEO and an organic lens, and we do believe that X, Y, or Z is the reason why we should take it. Sometimes we'll still get a no, which can be frustrating, but in that case it's just a case of keeping reiterating the importance of any kind of implementation, or maybe one that we revisit in 1 to 3 months time if performance hasn't quite increased as we'd have liked, and that might be one of the key factors.
Excellent.
I have a bit of a juicy question because you have, I guess, the larger companies that you deal with and the clients that you deal with, as well as the SMEs. What is sort of the general perception from your side of things as an SEO director as well? when dealing with larger clients that have more established sites and already understood the importance of SEO versus SMEs and their perception of SEO. And what would you like to say to them, I guess, if you had a soapbox right now on the importance of SEO?
Probably quite a few things, but I'll keep it safe just in case anyone's watching. I think it does naturally depend, which I'm trying to avoid giving the answer, but larger sites obviously can move a lot quicker. I think they purely, or they try and envision SEO as a channel that's tied to revenue, and they'll judge performance based on revenue typically, or the final completion, whether that's a form fill or whatever it is that they're trying to achieve through SEO. And it quite often is almost to an extent playing defense and protecting what you have, potentially versus a direct competitor in the space if you're well established. So it's those small changes, or maintenance SEO is a word that we like to call it sometimes, that they look for in terms of keeping the lights on, making sure that you're not potentially damaging the brand. So sometimes you can find it a little bit harder and challenging to really push through big tests or recommendations that might be fundamentally changing, like let's say completely changing an IA or a site navigation structure. Usually has more red tape and conversations and other teams involved, whereas on the startup side it is less so much about numbers consistently every day, but then it's also the conversation of how is this going to impact us, what's the reach, and how much resource is going to be required. And they're often typically forecasting quickly over shorter periods, and things move a lot quicker. So 1 week we might be focusing on a specific product, and then 2 months later it either gets canned or it gets changed or something new comes out. So it's that flexibility of a 12-month roadmap never really sticks in order, because things are moving so much. So I appreciate you asked a question around like the perception of SEO. I think it does kind of depend on the person on the other side and whether they come from a marketing experience or not. But I'd like to think that most, if not all, understand the value that it offers. Maybe an awareness of the tactics that you can take in order to influence, and others maybe have prejudged ideas of what SEO is and whether it's white hat, ethical, black hat, or some tactics that they maybe tried 5-10 years ago that once worked that maybe don't now.
And would you, from a junior, if you had to manage like a team of juniors, would you advise them rather to work on larger sites first, or what would be the preference, to work on smaller sites with more strategy, or understand how the big dogs work? Or is that just, I guess, down to personal preference as well?
I think ideally down to personal preference. I think you will find people are more engaged in e-commerce versus SaaS or tech or whatever it might be, and ultimately it's whatever fits them best in terms of type of site. But I do think if you've got an opportunity to be an expert in one specific area, definitely take it. It'll allow you to prove your value to the company when bigger sites come, or maybe an MVP style client comes along if it falls under your sector. But with that said, don't solely focus on one area, otherwise you might miss opportunities in publishing if you're only working in SaaS, for example, or something like that. So I would, try and lean towards something that you've genuinely got an interest in. But it is good to have both. So you startups typically ask a lot of questions around what things mean. So, what is a canonical tag? Why do we need to do this? All those kind of questions, because they're typically generalists. Whereas if you're working with a large scale site, you might be working with an SEO manager on their side in-house directly, who knows all the concepts but needs help with the strategy or the communication piece to the head of marketing or the senior team around the value that we're showing and how we're demonstrating growth. And that poses a different challenge when you're asked to present to a senior team of board members, for example, to report on progress and opportunities. So yeah, definitely try and be involved in both. And if you don't have a client stack that currently allows it, if you're on the agency side, there's no harm in reaching out to someone else and saying, can I sit in on calls? Can I join a call? Can you tell me about your experience in this industry or with this person, or with this client? And usually you can get a lot of value from that.
That's awesome.
Love it. And then going back to the time with Reach Interactive, because I think you touched on it at the start, and I think it's a pretty unique way to like jump into the industry. A lot of people moving into like a first-time job, especially like within SEO, it's tricky enough if you're just doing SEO, never mind getting exposed to like SEO, paid, digital PR, like everything. How was that for you in that first year? Was it overwhelming, or do you think it actually helped you understand how SEO fits into sort of the ecosystem?
Probably a little bit of both, to be honest. Definitely had a lot of stuff going on, trying to find out, where the most impactful channels for us were. SEO definitely played a role in that, and I think I was creating blog content myself, maybe like one article every 1 to 2 weeks or so, alongside various other things. So I think it's good to have one of those. You don't have to come from a generalist background to be successful in SEO, but if you haven't, it's good to think about those wider channels and the fact that, if you're an agency and you purely specialize in SEO or a different channel, there are going to be other agencies pitching wider channels that they're claiming are going to have the most value. They're going to be asking for more money. There's going to be an SLT group that's going to have to make budgeting decisions based on resources and time. So it definitely helped me from that standpoint to sort of determine where is my time best placed and what's going to bring the highest opportunity for us, both short term and long. So yeah, I'd encourage people to, if you have a marketing team, for example, go chat to them and talk about some of the challenges that they face. If you're purely an SEO manager, and just have conversations with different people, maybe your head of sales, or your finance team, or whoever it might be, and get a bit of an insight into the decision making and thought process that other people go through when they're signing off on either budget increases or SEO retainers, because it can help.
And then how was that transition? Obviously, when you said the second year was like they took a step back, was there any sort of advice you would give to people who maybe have jumped up to like from an exec level to like a management level, and now it's all sudden like it's on them now? So is there any advice, or how did you sort of deal with that yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the transition from that first to the second year was a tough but good learning curve, alongside actually going from a generalist to an SEO manager, where I was very much knew all the basics of SEO, but then getting thrown onto a call and asking to present a 100-slide audit was a big learning curve as well. But I think in both companies, I think the biggest sort of takeaway is that you learn stakeholder management, how to communicate effectively, understanding like what the other person on the other side of the conversation actually wants to hear about, whether that's purely, the number of organic clicks or conversions that you've got, or is it that they actually want to understand, what are you doing on a day-to-day, what tactics are you going to implement, what are the big ideas that are coming, and those kind of things. So I do think as you progress, whether that's in an SEO role or wider, you start to think more from a commercial lens, start to understand, which stakeholders want which information, and get a better process for sort of communicating your goals and ideas forward to get sign off. So yeah, I think expectation and being in charge of your own sort of success at that point is probably the biggest learning curve, and knowing how to deal with that.
Awesome. I wanted to sort of transition into the importance of soft skills, because it is a huge talk topic at the moment, and just within thought leadership as well. How have you sort of, I guess, you have such a unique position at the moment because you are working with big clients within Blue Array as an SEO director, as well as with the Ignite side of things. We chatted a little bit about this before the call, but learning business acumen, how important was that? What was your journey like? And do you have any advice to SEOs that are also sort of trying to master client side?
Yeah, for sure. I think soft skills and communication is definitely an interesting one, and I think there's two parts of it. It's not just client side, it's also internally as well, like how you position requesting support, requesting other people to take on tasks or whatever it might be for you internally is a big part in how you potentially are successful both in your career and with SEO strategies as well. I think being in a generalist role definitely helped me because I came from a background where I went through that traditional education and learned how to over communicate in a sense by writing 5,000-10,000 word essays at university. And that's definitely not saying that, you have to have gone through that process to know or learn those skills. I feel like, I definitely came from a background that was, write as much as you can to answer a question, and you definitely learn when you get into the business world that actually that's not the case. Like people just want the short form version of or summary of something. But that definitely helped me, and I think running a podcast in my previous company helped me in terms of managing relationships because I was dealing with booking guests, sending updates on timelines, all that kind of stuff. So I've very much taken the approach when I've moved into the SEO world of, try to over communicate where possible. And that's not, spam people with emails every day and give them 5 emails a day because then they'll hate you in the short version of that. But, if you're working on a task for a client and you're able to have a rough idea of when you're going to send it, like share that date with them. If it's something that you're willing and comfortable previewing with them, build a skeleton and say, this is the skeleton that I'm working on. Is this what you were kind of expecting? Because if they hate it, you'd rather them know straight away than in 2 weeks' time when you've sent it and you think it's all good at the end. And then just being honest with timelines. If something's not going to be there on a Monday, but you told them it would, get an email out very early, as early as you can Monday morning and say, this is why it's not going to be on time. Maybe you found a new opportunity to explore that you want to look into in more detail. Maybe it's just that something genuinely happened that has impacted it. But the more you communicate when to expect work or what to expect, for me has always worked. And then I think the other side of that is not trying to force wins. So, if a client has seen a negative decline in performance, or maybe has been stale for a month or two or whatever that period is, don't try and go into Search Console and find the tiniest little win to demonstrate that you're doing a really good job, because they will be able to find that. So having that honesty and building that relationship to be able to educate them and tell them that, like, I am an extension of your team and success for you is success for me, and I really do care that your brand starts to see positive increases, goes a long way. And I guess, I could go on this conversation for quite a while, and I'll lead you into potentially some more questions, because it's one that there's loads you could potentially talk about.
I also wanted to ask, just on the topic of timelines, actually. We had a guest on last week, Jordan from Previsible, and he sort of made an interesting statement, which was rightfully backed up, about how SEO doesn't take time. Like it is an investment, but there's always things happening. How did you guys, I think, come up with the 12-month scheme and for Ignite? And have you found it challenging, or what were some of the challenges, or were there any, unfair expectations from client side that you may have experienced? Can you just tell us a little bit about that coming up with that timeline and your experience with it?
Yeah, for sure. There are multiple reasons that I guess feed into that 12-month viewpoint. First one is that ultimately we do try and make potential clients aware that you have to commit to a certain period. not from a contractual standpoint, but because if you try and do everything within a month, or you only commit to 1 to 3 months of SEO, you're likely not going to succeed in the long run. Obviously, we know that there are quick wins that can be explored, but a continual strategy across a number of months or years is one that's going to be the most successful. And then the other is that ultimately people that join Ignite are coming in at a lower price point. So we want to work with startups and scale-ups, but we know that they might not have budgets that allow them that enterprise pricing. So that's one of the sort of trade-offs with having a more junior account manager, and some of the deep dives that we go into might not be as detailed with those account clients. So that 12 months gives us a graduation date essentially that then allows them to transition into our more traditional services. And it's just a nice, I guess, well-rounded figures. It allows us to build a 12-month roadmap, 12-month forecast in terms of where do we want to be year on year in a year's time. And yeah, not every client that's come through Ignite has gone through to that full 12-month period. There have been a couple that have maybe had a change of direction, or a change of budget circumstances, but for the most part, we're seeing that they're committed to that full 12 months, and then we've got that really strong foundational relationship for them to work with us in year 2, 3, 4, 5. Obviously, we're not at year 5 yet, but there are some great brands that we started early with that we're still working with now.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Cool,
And Liam, because obviously you mentioned that they don't have maybe the size of the budgets that your other clients have on the Blue Array side, are they tend to be a bit more sort of relaxed about, or more open to you guys trying sort of more unique strategies or different strategies to try and get those bigger results with sort of smaller budget, or are they still kind of strict to be on brand?
I think naturally, like, they'll always try and take the same brand tone of voice and guidelines that run across the wider company, but I think they definitely have a bit more of a flexibility when it comes to content creation in terms of any legal processes. They're quite willing to do maybe comparison pages against big competitors, or things like price calculators, or things that maybe take a little bit more resource that maybe your big enterprise clients don't really have as much of a desire to commit to. And they have a bit more flexibility just in terms of going into the CMS, making a quick change. There isn't that much hard-coded legacy code in the on the site and things like that, so we can be a bit more flexible in terms of changes. So yeah, I'd say naturally it varies, but there are a few more experimental things and quicker changes that can happen.
Excellent. And going forward, do you think like that the Ignite side of things can almost be like an academy for like people who have just sort of started, like execs who come in and maybe for the first 3-4 months get used to the processes, get used to everything, can go to there and learn a lot more, because obviously it's probably quicker paced. If things do go wrong from their side of things, it's not going to have as huge an impact as it would on like a larger client, or is it just sort of keeping it separate?
Yeah, we try and definitely do that. So like our process for an exec is that they'll go through like a really detailed first 3 months onboarding. We have our own academy, so the Blu-ray Academy, which has like the SEO Manager course on there and the tech course, so they'll work through those. And then they'll typically, be supported by an SEO Manager on our more traditional standard accounts, and they'll be supporting on calls when appropriate, doing reporting, things like that in the background. And then as soon as they hit that point where they're comfortable and ready to take on a client, Ignite's the perfect place for them. Not in a sense that Ignite clients mean less to us, but in a sense that it gives them a real chance to dive in with a company who can make lots of changes, can move quicker. It's less pressured in a sense that we usually scale in traffic rather than protecting traffic, and allows them to unpack a roadmap for the first time and figure out, here's a site that's got a few thousand clicks a month, where's the best place to go? And naturally they'll have support from various team members, but it really gives them the chance to understand, what is the right place or right area to focus on, versus maybe inheriting an account from maybe someone leaving or someone moving priorities within the team, and they've taken on a client who's been with us 2-3 years, that's had a roadmap established for that entire period. That's more of a challenge to then come in and try and make that impression and bring new ideas to a roadmap that might have been established for quite some time.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's great.
I usually leave this question to the end, but like now we're like close to the end, and I'm like, Liam, I need your like elevator pitch for this answer. But I love to ask about the future of SEO, and especially as we are nearing the end of the year. Liam, I know you may have covered some notes on this, but I would love to pick your brain a little bit about that. And what are your thoughts towards SEO in 2025?
Yeah, it's a great question, one that I sat down and tried to put a sort of a perfect answer to. But if I'm being honest, I think if anyone confidently claimed that they knew exactly what it was going to look like in 12, 24 months, I'd call them out, essentially. But I think from my side, I think it does go back to that point earlier where I talked about what startup SEO looks like. And I do think that we are starting to pick up wider pieces of the digital marketing space that are around brand, or around perception. Digital PR is much more integrated with SEO than it was 3-5 years ago, in a sense that, I'd like to think most teams are collaborating a lot more closer, rather than just having the digital PR team on one side as over on the other side. So I do think we're encompassing quite a few more touch points across that user journey and funnel. And I think it is becoming, naturally, due to AI overviews, automation, all those kind of things, the antitrust lawsuit, I think we are shifting to more of a focus that actually is less volume, more conversions. And in the long run, I think that helps. It's great to look at Search Console and see plus percentages, or millions of clicks. I remember a smile on my face the first time I went into a Search Console account and saw like 1 billion impressions over like a 3-month period. I was like, wow, that's like an insane number. Actually, what does that mean? So I feel like the way that we're elevating ourselves as an industry, and this is more so from the people side than the SERP results and what's changing, but it's, do those billion clicks matter? Do we have pages on our site that's contributing absolutely nothing to the web, and it's vanity? And actually, we'd rather get 100,000 impressions if they're going to convert. And I feel like the way that my LinkedIn looks and resources that get shared with me regularly are approaching SEO tends to be the shift and awareness piece to becoming more of an integrated part of that digital marketing mix for both agencies and brands.
Very interesting. Yeah, Liam, thank you so much for joining. And I know we could have gone on for an hour, honestly. We love talking to you. And we're very excited to see what the next year holds for Ignite, as well as Blue Array. We hope you have a great weekend, and we will chat soon. If anyone is listening and wants to follow Liam, I will link him all around, and you can find him and bombard his DMs with questions as well. Thank you so much for joining him.
Thanks, both. Really appreciated being on here and the questions that you've asked.
Awesome.
Cheers, Liam. Bye. Appreciate it.
Cheers.